Alright, so we're going to go ahead and talk now about the front, which is about multiplying and dividing integers. So a product is negative if it has an odd number of negative factors. A product is positive if it has an even number of negative factors. So let's look at number 1. So negative 4 is negative and 5 is positive. So there's only one negative, so it's odd, so it stays negative. Okay, so since it's odd, and then we don't worry about the negative or positive, and we just take 4 times 5, and we get 20. So your answer would be a negative 20 for that problem. On number 2, we have negative 2, and then we have negative 3, so we have two negatives. That's even, so according to our rule, if it's even, your answer is going to be a positive. So 2 times 5 is 10, 10 times 3 is 30, so your answer is a positive 30. You really don't need this plus sign in front. I just did it so we remember. Okay, 3 negatives, so that's odd. So we have a negative, and then we did 10 times 2, 20 times 4, which is 80. Okay, so this technically, you can rewrite it as negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. We shouldn't have to. We should realize that there's 4 negatives, so my answer is going to be positive. And then 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16. So my answer is positive 16. Okay, here we have 1 negative, so 1 is odd, so we keep the negative sign. 3 times 5 is 15. Okay, this one we have 3 negatives, because there's is to the third power, so 3 negatives, so 3 is odd, so keep the negative. 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8. Alright, so now coming here, we have all positives, so this is just like normal, and so all positives, so 0 negatives, that is an even, so we keep it positive. 2 times 4 is 8. 8 times 5 is 40. Okay. Alright, we have 3 negatives, so it's going to be a negative. 1/3 times 3, which we should know a third of a 3 is just 1. And then 1 times 2 is 2. So negative 2 would be my answer here. Okay, so I have 3 negatives. So since I have 3 negatives, it's going to be a negative because 3 is odd. And then I have 3 times n times n times n, which we can write as n to the third power. Okay, then we have 1 negative out here, and we have 4 negative a's. We could rewrite this if we wanted to. Times negative a, times negative a, times negative a. We get 5 negatives, so it would be a negative because it's odd. And then we get 1 times a to the fourth. We really don't need this 1 here because it's just a to the fourth, because 1 times anything is just that number. Okay, so the 4 is positive, the b is negative. There's 3 of those, so it's going to be a negative. And then 4 times negative b to the third would be 4 times b to the third. Okay. Alright, now it says a value when x is equal to negative 5, so all we're doing is plugging in negative 5 here. So if I rewrote this, it would be negative 4 times negative 1 times negative 5. That means there's 3 negatives, so it's going to be negative, and then 4 times 1 is 4, times 5 is 20. So my answer would be negative 20. Okay, we plug that in, so I get 3 times negative 5. And we have a double negative, so these become positive, right? Because a negative times a negative is a positive. And then we go ahead and do 3 times 5 squared. 3 and 5 are both positive, so it's going to be a positive. 5 squared is 25, times 3 is 75. Okay, then on this one, we plug in 3 times that negative 5. Even though the x is not in parentheses, that negative 5 is what x is. So you have to square the whole thing. So it's not just 5 squared, and then the negative on the outside, it's negative 5 squared. Okay, so we have 2 negatives because that's squared. So then we get negative, or 2 negatives, so it's even, so it becomes a positive, whatever we get. And then 5 times 5 is 25, times 3 is 75. So my answer is positive 75. Okay, then we do the same thing, negative 5 to the third. Okay, so this is going negative 5 3 times, and then there's a negative 5 on the outside, so there's 4 negatives, so it's going to be a positive. And then 5 times 5 times 5 times 5 gets you 625. Okay? Alright. Moving on. Now we're evaluating with negative 2. So we have negative 9 times negative 2 times negative 2. So there's 3 negatives, so it's a negative. 9 times 2 is 18. 18 times 2 is 36. Then we do the same thing. This becomes negative 2, so we have 3 times 4 times negative 2. Oh, double negative, that becomes positive. We have 0 negatives, so it's going to be a positive. So 3 times 4 is 12, times 2 is 24. Okay. Then we plug in again. 3 times a negative 2. Third, double negative, that becomes positive. So now we're just looking at 3 times 2 to the third. 2 to the third is 8. 8 times 3 is 24. Okay, now we're going to look at division. Division follows kind of the same rule. If you take a positive divided by a negative, you get a negative. If you have a positive and a negative, you get a negative. If you get the same signs, it becomes a positive. Okay, so 1 negative, so it would be a negative. 10 divided by 2 is 5. 1 negative, so it's a negative. 15 divided by 5 is 3. Then this is a fraction, but there's only 1 negative, so we get that negative. And then we need to make it so we can actually divide it. So 45 over 1 divided by 5 over 6. We skip, we find the reciprocal, or we flip. So this becomes 6/5, and we multiply. Okay, I recommend doing the butterfly method with it and looking at your diagonals. So is there anything in 45 and 5 that could divide into both of those? Yeah, 5 can. So 45 divided by 5 is 9. 5 divided by 5 is 1. And then if we look at our other diagonal, 6 and 1, nothing goes into both of those. So then we just multiply across. 9 times 6 is 54. 1 times 1 is 1. So my answer is negative 54. Okay, this sign right here, if you didn't know, right there, that line just means to divide. So I have 2 and 1/3 divided by negative 3. There's only 1 negative, so it's going to be a negative because it's odd. Okay, then we don't have to worry about the negatives anymore. We got to make this improper. So 2 times 3 is 6, plus 1 is 7. So over here I get 7/3. And then I skip it. I have to flip 3 ones or find the reciprocal. So 3 ones would be 1/3. And then I multiply it. Okay, if I look, my diagonals, there's nothing that goes into 7 and 3 and nothing that goes into 3 and 1. So I just multiply across. So I get 7 over 9. Negative 7/9 will be my answer. Okay, so then we can do negative 39 over divided by negative 4/3. We have 2 negatives, so the ending will be a positive because it's a even number. We multiply. We do make this improper. 3 times 4 is 12, plus 1 is 13. 13 over 3, and this is division. Okay, we skip it, so this is just 39 over 1. We flip it, so this becomes 3 over 13. 3 over 13, and then we multiply it. Okay, so I know, just by looking at this, that 13 goes into 39 and into 13. If you didn't know that, you could multiply it and then reduce it, but that'll be a lot more work, so I'm going to go ahead and reduce it. So this 13 goes into this 3 times. 13 goes in 13 once. 3 times 3 is 9. 9 over 1, which is the same thing as just 9, and we keep that positive. Alright, moving on. Negative 2/5 divided by 3. You put that 3 over 1. We flip it, so it becomes 1/3. And we multiply it. And there's a negative and a positive, so there's only 1 negative, so it becomes negative. So 2 times 1 is 2. 5 times 3 is 15. Alright, so this is just like rewriting as negative 6 divided by negative 1/2, which there's 2 negatives, so my end result will be positive. Don't have to worry about the negatives anymore. And then I'm going to skip, flip, so this becomes 2 over 1, and this becomes multiply. So I do 6 times 2, which is 12 over 1, so my answer is just positive 12. Okay, keep going. So we skip the first one, we flip the second one, so this becomes 15 over 1 times, right, we changed to multiplication, 3 over 5, and it's a negative, so 2 negatives, so it's even, so it becomes a positive. I'm going to look at my diagonals to see if there's anything in common. 15 and 5, I know 5 goes into both of those, so this becomes 3. This becomes 1. We multiply across, we should get 9 over 1, which is the same thing as 9. Okay, so now we're on here. So we rewrite this, negative 21 over 2 divided by 7. We have 1 negative, so your answer is going to be a negative. And then we have to skip the first one. We flip the second one, so it's usually 7 over 1. But to flip it, it'd become 1 over 7. And we multiply. So I see in my diagonals right away that 21 and 7. 7 goes into both of those, so this becomes 3. This becomes 1. 2 and 1, nothing goes into. So then we multiply across. 3 times 1 is 3. 2 times 1 is 2. So I get negative 3 halves as my answer. Okay. So then evaluate this when x is negative 5 and y is negative 1. So when x is negative 5, all you're doing is plugging this in. So 5 plus x, which is negative 5, divided by 5 times y, which is negative 1. You do the top and then you do the bottom. So 5 plus a negative 5, opposite signs we combine, or we subtract. Opposite signs we subtract. So 5 minus 5 is 0. 5 times a negative 1, we have only one negative, so it's a negative. 5 times 1 is 5. So 0 divided by 5, negative 5 is just 0. Anything divided by 0, 0 divided by anything is just 0. Okay, so then we have negative 2 times a, which is negative 2, over a, which is negative 2, plus b, which is negative 3. So 2 negatives, so it becomes a positive. 2 times 2 is 4. Then we do bottom, negative 2. Negative 3, same signs we combine, so it becomes 5, and we keep the sign. So this answer would be negative 4/5. Alright, so now we're going to simplify. So when it says simplify, we're going to break it apart. So we're going to look at 18x divided by 3, and then we're going to look at negative 9 divided by 3. So 18x divided by 3. So 18 divided by 3 is 6, and then you have your x. Okay, then we're looking at negative 9, because that negative is in front of that 9. Negative 9 divided by 3. So we get negative, because it's 1 negative. 9 divided by 3 is 3. So my answer would be 6x minus 3. All you're doing is dividing the different parts of the thing. Okay, so now we're here. So we're going to do our diagonal. So 24 divided by negative 4. So we only have one negative, so it's odd, so it keeps the negative sign. Right, and then 24 divided by 4 is 6. Then we do circle the next little section. So I have negative 8x and negative 4. So both are negative, so it becomes a positive. And then 8 divided by 4 is 2, and then you still have that x. So your answer would be negative 6 plus 2x. Okay, next one. We do the same thing. We do our thing. So 9 divided by 3 is just 3. Then we do our other diagonal. Negative 27x divided by 3, so it's a negative and a positive, so it's going to be a negative answer. 27 divided by 3 is 9x, and there is your answer. And then we do this one, which would be 32x divided by 4, which is 8x, and then you do the other way diagonal, negative 8 divided by 4, which is a negative 2, because 1 negative, it would be odd. Alright, so that is all for your multiplying and dividing integer 0.1a. This is the back of that worksheet.